Okay, welcome to our second Arkansas Legislative Roundup. It's Jenny and Hannah from For Our People again, and we're here to take you through all the things that happened this week at the Capitol.
Yeah, so starting off, we'll start with what happened today on Thursday. Senate Bill 43 was passed through the Senate Committee for City, County, Local. And basically, what Senate Bill 43 does is categorize drag performances as adult-oriented businesses. And why that's so problematic is that it's targeting trans people. Despite what they tell you, it will hurt trans people in the long run.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting when Senator Stubblefield sat down to introduce his bill. He talked several times about how drag performances steal children's innocence and violate their personal boundaries, that it confuses kids and trivializes family events. I think he is talking about, certain events like story time with drag queens that I know some libraries participate in. And he talked about like these personal memories that he had of being a child and like seeing or hearing things that he still to this day carries, which was really interesting. And we don't want to speculate, but it seems like maybe that's not a great reason to pass a law, is because you maybe have some kind of personal memory that stuck with you that you regret or don't like as an adult. So that was an interesting way to frame the bill, in my opinion. And there were a lot of folks who spoke against it. There was only one member of the public who spoke for it, and that was Jerry Cox. He's the founder and the president of the Family Council, which is an Arkansas anti-abortion group that backs some of our most extreme legislation in the state, particularly reproductive justice legislation. So Hannah, maybe talk some about those folks that did speak against the bill.
Yeah, and I mean, before we get into that part, just going back to the family council testimony, he made it a point to say that we're willing to pass any legislation that will help children. And, we're second in the nation for food insecurity when it comes to children. And we're not seeing legislation that addresses that. So that argument in and of itself is void at this point. Because we're not doing what we need to do for children. And I think it's important that we remind the Arkansas Legislature that they're not the morality police, and that their job is not to tell people what is right and wrong as when it comes to like your own personal feelings. Their job is to write laws that better the lives of their constituents, and they're not doing that. And that's what we heard from several people who testified against the bill. There was a drag queen who came dressed in drag, and no one on the committee asked any questions. They don't care. They have it in their heads that this is right and we're going to do it. And it doesn't matter what the public says. And that's really, really disappointing.
Why do we even need this in Arkansas? Have there been issues with this? And, no, the answer is no, I guess, other than what Senator Stubblefield says is these lasting personal experiences that he wouldn't actually name. Like, there was really no reason to introduce a bill like this except to make a political statement against the LGBTQ community. And also, I thought it was really powerful when Holly Dixon with ACLU Arkansas testified against the bill, and she clearly pointed out that in really damning testimony, I think, to the bill, that it violates our First Amendment rights, and it also violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And she made a really great case for how this bill is unconstitutional because of that. And also, if you're kind of more in the like, well, I'm not really into the culture wars thing, but you care about fiscal responsibility, these types of bills are going to they will be challenged in court, and that will cost Arkansas taxpayers money. So that's just another way of looking at it, why these bills are pretty crummy.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, again, we talk about wasteful spending and then we present bills like this that we know are going to go to court. And speaking of anti-trans legislation, we have another bill from Mary Bentley, House Bill 1156, which is targeting trans youth. If you are a trans student and you go on a field trip, you won't be able to use the restroom for the gender that you identify as. And it also applies to changing rooms. And this is a big thing. If the school does not comply, they will be subject to losing 5% of their state funding, which is a huge chunk of money. And speaking of schools, so not only are we going to target children, we're not going to give teachers raises like we said we would. So at this point, the legislature has filed 267 bills. That might be different when this airs, but 267 bills as of right now. And we have yet to see any bill that addresses teacher pay. Assuming that it's going to come in a very large bill that's going to be hard for people to digest. We'll see. Still patiently waiting, but the patience is running thin.
Yeah. And if you are frustrated by this, like we are, as proud members of the Pay AR Teachers Coalition, we are asking for a standalone teacher salary raise bill that was promised to them in August of 2022. And here we are, teachers were told to wait, and they've waited long enough. We should seize this legislation. It should be standalone, and they should not try to cram it in with a bunch of other policy that could potentially cause harm to public education institutions. So, we have seen an interesting bill that was filed that would eliminate the state income tax for teachers. And, not really understanding the intent of that bill, I guess you can infer that that's some kind of weird, magic trick that would make up for salaries instead. But again, removing vehicles by which we pay for public education is not really addressing the issue, and it's also not addressing the teacher pay raise issue. So if you're frustrated, call your reps, be polite, be respectful, use personal experiences. That is always helpful. That's more helpful than form emails or than yelling. If you want to yell, we highly recommend yelling on Twitter. That's the best place to yell, or go scream in your pillow or start a rally and yell there. But do be polite when you contact your representatives. Otherwise, it's very unlikely that they will be hearing the words that are coming out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm. And, I'm really interested to see this large education bill. It's coming from the governor's office. I'm also really interested to see the kind of fractures within this group, because I know, not every charter school wants to open their doors to every child. So I am interested to see the tears on that side whenever we do get to look at this bill. But I am concerned that it's going to be so large and so massive that it's, no one's going to want to read it.
That's a really good point. We heard last week in a Democrat Gazette article that some Republican legislators were like, hey, we don't even know what's in the bill. We can't make a comment on it. Once that thing gets filed and we don't know who's going to run it on either the House or the Senate side, we have to wait and see. I think it's all kind of been like hush hush maybe, or just not, it hasn't come together. So it appears to be hush hush hush. But that thing is going to be thick. Like it's going to be hundreds of pages. Kudos to the BLR staff that have to draft that bill, who we know are probably working on it right now. But yeah, to your point, like what are the negotiations that are happening to get this to a place where House and Senate Education Committee chairs feel good enough to run it? Or to have it introduced. So that's a big question. We're still in the wait and see point. Like, what are the negotiations that are happening to get this to a place where House and Senate education? What we have also seen in these first couple of weeks, not just these really blatant attacks on particular communities like the LGBTQ community with this bill, we've also seen some really interesting legislation filed that is pretty much anti-business, in my opinion, our opinion. One bill in particular is House Bill 1049 by Representative Stephen Meeks. And that bill is modeled after legislation that has been passed in other states like Texas, West Virginia, and Oklahoma. And this bill would basically punish financial institutions or banks for having quote unquote woke political stances. One in particular would ban these types of banks that our legislature deems as woke or having woke politics, would ban state entities from doing business with them. The reason that's problematic is because our public retirement accounts are managed probably by some of these types of financial institutions. And, our state would be making a political statement saying, hey, we're refusing to do business with them. They're not allowed to do business in the state with us because they're too liberal, or their policy is too progressive, or because their one CEO said this one thing this one time. And so again, it is using a group or an entity to make a political statement. And in this case, it's not attacking, LGBTQ community members, but it's attacking business and financial institutions in particular. Wharton School of Business in Pennsylvania did a study in Texas after a similar bill was passed there last year. And it basically said that interest rates for public retirement accounts shot through the roof, $300 to $500 million more in the first 8 months after that bill was passed. So that's just terrible. I'm pretty sure people who hold public retirement accounts don't want their retirements to be politicized. I can't speak for them, but would love to hear from you if you are somebody who holds a public retirement account with the state. There would be broad financial implications for people who have, retirement accounts, like our police and our firefighters and our teachers, people who work really hard and deserve to not have their livelihoods and their retirements messed with to make a political statement. So that's something to keep an eye on. And, I think we are interested to hear how business will push back, if there will be any push-ins for people who have, retirement accounts, like our police and our firefighters and our teachers, people who work really hard and deserve to not have their we are kind of at the end of what's going on in the week. There was an abortion bill that was filed earlier today. You may be asking what possible further restrictions could be put on reproductive rights in the state of Arkansas, where people essentially have no abortion rights. But this bill, House Bill 1174 by Representative Womack, quoting from the bill, it says the intent of this act is to add protections for unborn children and repeal provisions that may allow a person to solicit, advise, encourage, or coerce a pregnant woman to abort her unborn child. So basically, it would amend the criminal code regarding abortion and who aids or abets abortion. So an interesting bill, even though abortion remains pretty much inaccessible in the state of Arkansas. This would amend our criminal code. So criminal and abortion, just that tells you those two words together, what kind of bill this is. So we'll keep an eye on that for you to see if that gets up anytime soon. To end on a positive note, there was a really lovely pro-trans, anti-SB 43 rally today, Thursday afternoon at the Capitol, that I believe Intransitive, that group, put on, and was really just, I guess, soul filling to see people come together and sing and be present and create space for one another in a difficult time where their community feels very attacked. So yeah, at least we had that this week.
I also, just real quick, this isn't necessarily important, or, it's not going to change anything that we've talked about, but while Senate Bill 43 was being heard in the Senate, there was a group of local drag queens who were painting and refurbishing a shelter, a homeless shelter. I've never heard anyone talk about how Gary Stubblefield has done anything for anyone in Arkansas. So
Yeah.
something to keep in mind.
We want to see more solving of actual problems, in which the drag community has apparently modeled really well for Arkansans, and less political culture war rhetoric, shame, hate, solutions in search of a problem legislation from our actual lawmakers. And just a friendly reminder to everyone here, although they probably already know, that the best way to hold our public leaders accountable is at the ballot box.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that's it for this week. A lot of stuff happened, but not a lot of actual things, if that makes sense. So I'm hoping next week we really get in there and actually get some stuff moving. But we'll see.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
525,600 minutes. Do you measure?